The judge is looking at a person, but there is already a score sitting there in front of him, high risk, low risk. What does that score not see about the person? And why does that matter?
That's a really intriguing question. You're not only thinking about the scores, but you're thinking about the life force. What brought this person in front of you?
When a system is completely blind to our past mistakes, what is it actually learning?
Well, what it is learning is to really replicate.
Can you give me a real example, a case where software probably flags someone as risk, but if you actually dig into that history, it is not because of something they did. It is because of something that was done to them. What does that actually look like?
That looks like data trauma.
So where does the chain break and who walks away clean?
I don't think anyone is walking away clean.
You used a phrase called code is the new cop. What do you mean by that?
An algorithm is now an undercover cop.
So where exactly do value enters the system?
No one is just writing code.
Have you thought about that future?
And that is the work that brought me into this space, because I wanted to ensure that the future that we are building is not only equitable.
Every day, AI is increasingly influencing decisions that affects people's lives. Who gets hired, who gets approved for a loan, who gets medical care, and who gets flagged as a potential risk. We often assume these systems are objective because they're built on data. But what if the data itself carries history? And what happens when AI can't distinguish between a fair decision and an unfair one from the past? My guest today is Professor Renée Cummings, a criminologist by training and now one of the world's most recognized voices in the AI governance. Renée is Professor of Practice at University of Virginia School of Data Science, a non-resident senior fellow at the Brookings Institute, has served on the World Economic Forum's Data Equity Council and the Global AI Governance Alliance. And she is listed among the world's top 100 women in the AI ethics. Her work spans classroom, courtroom, and the boardroom. She has briefed policymakers, including the US Senate, bringing her background in criminal justice to how AI systems are built, governed, and trusted. In this conversation, we explore how history becomes data, why AI systems inherit the past, who's accountable when automated decisions cause harm, and emerging risks around child safety and agentic AI, and what every founder, product leader, and the builder should think about before asking machines to participate in decisions that affects human lives. Let's get started. Just think about that for a moment. The judge is looking at a person, but there is already a score sitting there in front of him, high risk, low risk. What does that score not see about the person? And why does that matter?
You know, that's a really intriguing question. And I think in the criminal justice system, we have been understanding that the law must serve as a form of therapeutic intervention. So I think at this stage in the criminal justice system, when you're looking at a defendant, you're not only thinking about the scores, but you're thinking about the life force. What brought this person in front of you? What are the challenges they face in front of you? And how best can the criminal justice serve this individual? I think one of the approaches that comes out of criminal justice that I brought to the space of data and AI is that need for a trauma-informed perspective. What the judge is not going to see and often does not see, because we know when you're a judge, there are many cases in front of you, and you want to do as many cases as you can, expeditiously. But I think what the judge does not see is the future.
Judge doesn't see the future. Think about that for a second. A score is a record of the past, but a decision is supposed to be about what happens next. And that gap is where this whole conversation lives. And here's the thing, the score doesn't just disappear once the hearing is over, it becomes something else entirely. It becomes data, and that data doesn't stay in one room. So here is the part that I find fascinating. That score does not disappear after the hearing, right? It becomes the data. Then thousands of decisions like this become the training data for the next system. Nobody sat down and designed that data set. It simply exhausts left behind the old system, isn't it?
Most definitely. And when I speak about taking a trauma informed approach, it's about understanding the history, the provenance, the anatomy of the data that you are using, and understanding that many times that data moves through the system, carrying with it trauma from every prior experience it has interacted with. Where did it come from? How was it used? How many times it was used? What were the decisions made with this data? How many of these decisions worked? How many of them did not work? How many of them created undue challenges? I always say data is the most powerful asset that we have at the moment. It could either empower, it could disempower, it can create opportunities, it can deny opportunities, it can open access. It can close access. Data, as we both know, is probably the greatest geopolitical game changer at the moment as well. But we've also got to understand that something very intimate about data exists. And in that intimacy, that requires a requisite level of due diligence and duty of care and an understanding of due process to know that this thing called data can do spectacular things, and it can do some very dangerous things as well. So you've got to understand where it began. You've got to understand every which place it has gone to, and you've got to understand where you intend for it to go.
You know, the technology does not know the history. It can't tell the difference between a good decision and a past human error. So to the algorithm, it is all just about truth. So, Professor Cummings, my question is, when a system is completely blind to our past mistakes, and what is it actually learning?
Well, what it is learning is to really replicate those mistakes, but now at speed and at a scale that is unimaginable. So it is so incumbent on us, the individuals who are conceptualizing the technology, who are building the technology, who are deploying the technology, who are adopting the technology, to understand how critical it is to govern the technology.
Can you give me a real example, a case where software probably flags someone as risk, but if you actually dig into that history, it is not because of something they did, it is because of something that was done to them. What does that actually look like?
That looks like data trauma. And I think in 2016, the journalism outfit ProPublica did an expose that looked at machine risk in recidivism tools. And recidivism tools rate and rank reoffending, whether or not an individual is going to reoffend if they receive bail. And what that expose showed us were the ways in which data was being used as a proxy for many things that the system was not ready to deal with. So we had children who were getting higher risk scores than adult career criminals. You had Black and brown and poor defendants who were getting a longer sentence than non-Black and non-brown defendants and non-poor defendants. So what the system showed was the extraordinary amount of bias, the extraordinary amount of discrimination, and the fact that the data sets that we were using were carrying a history of traumatic experiences, a history of things that did not represent the best of humanity or the best of decision making or the best ways in which we could think of each other. So I think if anyone is interested in seeing how machines can do some dangerous work and create these zombie predictions and overestimate risks, and it's just not the overestimating. Remember, one of the things that I've always said, and I entered this space about 10 years ago, and one of the things that I said the minute that I entered the space is that criminal justice will always be the conscience of artificial intelligence. Because in the criminal justice space, we make some very critical decisions. And now, a decade into AI and responsible AI and trustworthy AI and thinking about how we govern this technology, we are realizing that an algorithm creates an extraordinary amount of consequences. And we've got to understand those consequences if we want to harness the benefits and the rewards of this technology.
You know, in the real world, people just don't pass through one system. So someone might be assessed by a policing system, a bail system, later a sentencing system. They look like separate decisions, but if they're all drawing from the same historical patterns, are they really independent judgments, or are they reinforcing the same assumptions in different places?
Of course it is. And in data science, we speak about reinforcement learning. And if we're using large language models are built on reinforcement learning. And the question is, what do we continue to reinforce? What are the patterns that we continue to reinforce? What are the trends that we continue to reinforce? What are the anomalies that we continue to reinforce? So I think the criminal justice system situates it very nicely because we
Mm,
start to see questions of civil rights versus proprietary rights,
mm,
trade secrets versus human rights. And how do we ensure we use this technology for the best of humanity? Because in the criminal justice system, a decision can not only cause you your freedom, a decision could often cause you your life. And this is what we need to think about when we're thinking about algorithms. How is it going to affect the trajectory of a life force?
Children scoring higher risk than adult career criminals. And that's not hypothetical. That's a real study on a real tool used in real courtrooms. Now, here's what I wanted to know. And it is tempting to hear all of that and think, okay, that's somebody else's system, somebody else's problem. But once this pattern becomes data, they travel. And I wanted to know exactly how far. You know, here is what I'm wondering of what you said. It's easy to listen to this conversation and think this is about the criminal justice system, but is it? Or once these patterns get built into the data, do they start showing up into every decisions are being made in people? For example, in hiring, lending, insurance, healthcare.
It shows up everywhere, and we're seeing that
Exactly.
now. And we've been victims of that now. We've seen it in fair lending that sometimes seems very unfair. We've seen it in education that shows who gets access, who does not get access. There was a major case in just during the I can't remember if it was 2021,
Hmm.
22. Don't hold me to task, but it was around the time of COVID, where in the UK we saw what happened when a grading algorithm sort of ran amok and did not deliver the kinds of grades for the A-level examinations that the country had, and children and young people in a particular demographic, socioeconomic demographic, felt the
Hmm.
brunt of that decision, and it really created quite a scandal. When we think about hiring algorithms, and now
Hmm.
more and more that we are doing hiring using algorithmic tools, using sometimes video and audio, we realize that the bias is built into these systems. If you have a particular accent, you may not be scoring where you want to score, if you have a disability, if you have an inability to concentrate or to focus, if you have a vision problem, all of these things are now creating an extraordinary amount of chaos for individuals. We have algorithmic decision-making systems in the hiring processes that are just phasing people out and putting them out to sort of pasture. So what we are seeing is that data, it's like the ocean. And when something goes into the ocean, we cannot separate the water in the ocean and said this water came from here and that water came from there, right? It all is in the same. So I think of data the same way. It's like an ocean, and it all gets mixed up and it all gets, swirled up. And when it hits you like a wave, it hits you.
That's my next question. So we talked about how the history becomes the data and how that data shapes the next generation of decisions. Every new model is supposed to be better than the last. But if it is learning from the same inertia of data or the ocean that you talked about, is it actually progress, or can we ever escape that cycle?
I don't think we're ever going to be able to escape it, because we continue to see what happens with our large language models. We've been able to sort of reimagine intelligence. We've been able to really enhance our workflows. We've been able to do things in a shorter amount of time. But there are also challenges where we continue to see much of the knowledge situated in these large language models are very sort of Eurocentric and Americanized. We see that there are many other geographical spaces with different interpretations of intelligence and knowledge that need to be included in these large language models. We see that many countries and various continents are creating their large language models that reflect their own experiences, their lived experiences, their languages, their cultures. We know that large language models have given us some very inaccurate data that looks very accurate. The way it's formalized, the way the grammar has been used as to present a solid sort of intellectual aesthetic, but the information is not factual. The information actually is just not real. So we know that we could use large language models to do great things, but we also know there are an extraordinary amount of risks. And this is why, for me, it's always about the governance question. It's always about the oversight. It's always about what is the value that we want to create. Or if it's a government, how do you stand up your national AI strategy or your national data protection legislation? So there are many conversations happening in AI. And I always say there is no AI without data. And data is the lifeblood. Data is the oxygen. Data is the food on which the algorithms feed. So we've got to get our data right to get our AI right. And this is why it's so critical for us to understand the power of data as it is attached to the power of the algorithm.
So we have been talking about the data underneath these systems, what gets lost, what travels forward. Now I want to go to what happens when the system built on that data actually hurts someone. Who's responsible? What it costs? And why the safeguards everyone points to don't catch it. So every company says that they test these systems, right? Audits, compliance, all of it. Yet Amazon hiring tool passed its checks and quietly penalized resume with the word women's. Nobody programmed that. It learned it. What do our tests keep missing?
I think our test keeps missing that one word that I often use, and that is that word called trauma. And we don't understand the impact of these decisions. And everything you just spoke to speaks to that question of the traumatic experiences. So an algorithm makes a decision, and we may call it an unintended consequence, but to the individual, to the family, to the society that has been rejected or that has been harmed, it is not an unintended consequence. It is something that is real. If a family has been denied a loan based on an algorithm that not only impacts the family now, but it impacts future generations because we know how critical a house is when it comes to generational wealth or building wealth or just situating a family in a foreign country. So when we think about the power of algorithms and when we think about data and we think about those decisions, a decision made now does not end now. A
Hmm.
decision made now could impact generations to come. So when we speak about future proofing data and future proofing AI and future proofing AI governance, we are speaking about long term impacts. And the challenge is this: none of us truly understand what is happening in an algorithmic system, what's happening with an AI tool. We have a particular understanding. We have a significant understanding, but we have a limited understanding. And the greatest scientific minds are now saying that we don't truly know the potential, the power of this technology. We know the promise. We know what it's doing. We know the excitement that we feel. We know that we can do extraordinary things. But we know that some dangerous things are being deployed with this technology as well. So we've got to understand every data decision is a legacy decision.
Every day, data decision is a legacy decision. And that's a heavy thing to carry into the product roadmap. But it raises obvious next question. When one of those decisions goes terribly wrong and someone is actually harmed, who answers for it? And I wanted her to walk me through the actual chain. So I want us to understand how a system goes live and it harms someone. Maybe it misses a cancer diagnosis or wrongly flags a customer for a fraud. When that happens, who is actually accountable? Can
Well,
you
then you've
walk
got
me
to ask
through the
yourself.
chain?
Yeah, so definitely. So you've got to ask yourself, is it the person who built the system? Is it the person who deployed the system? Is it the person who adopted the system? Now we're realizing it's everyone. It's every one of those individuals are responsible. So when I speak about a duty of care, that speaks about liability. That speaks about responsibility. Also the duty to warn. Where was the duty to warn? To tell people that this is what the system can do and this is what the system cannot do.
But clearly, it must be extremely difficult to hold people accountable because it may not be just one person decision, it's a chain. So where
Well,
does the chain break and who walks away clean?
I don't think anyone is walking away clean. I think what you are explaining now is what the criminal justice system is now confronting. So,
Hmm.
algorithmic decision making is still something that is very new to the ways in which all laws have been designed. And one of the things that we've realized through large language models, we started to get the first set of big challenges around intellectual property. The fact that many of these large language models were being trained on data that belong to many
Hmm.
creatives, authors, filmmakers, poets, thinkers, philosophers, all of that scraped to train these models. And now we are seeing the kinds of class action lawsuits and the challenges that companies are now facing to say, where did you get that data? How many people's works came together to create that one sentence that has been deployed by a large language model when it comes to AI governance? And these are the things that we've got to think about very, very sophisticatedly because we've got to understand that chain of responsibility. So when we speak about responsible AI, that is what we're speaking about. When we speak about public trust in AI, that is what we are speaking about. And these are new challenges for the criminal justice system. And we know most definitely the system continues to face these challenges because more and more of these cases are coming up in the criminal justice system because people want redress.
Yep.
People want redress, and it is redress that is forcing us to reimagine the ways in which we have governed technology in the past.
Nobody walks away clean. That's not a comfortable answer if you're a founder. There is no single villain to point to, which means there is no one who gets feel safer either. So I pushed her further. If a system is genuinely broken, not buggy, actually broken, when do you stop trying to fix it? Most people listening to us want this technology to work. And I'm
So
sure
do I.
there's no second thought about it. Everybody wants it. They are not against AI. But every now and then, you look at the system and realize it's fundamentally broken. Where is that line for you? When do you keep trying to fix a system? And when do you accept that it is simply shouldn't exist in the current form?
Well, I would say this. I'm super excited about this technology, and I've spent a lot of time working with this technology and trying to get the best of this technology.
Yeah.
I think this technology is absolutely spectacular. The promise of AI is beyond brilliant. The rewards can be extraordinary for every country uh, trying to deploy or stand up any kind of AI tool. My passion for AI is in healthcare and what we can do when it comes to longevity and human prosperity, and of course, the ways in which we could use this to build a greater society. But if we want to get the rewards, we've got to understand the risks. And we've got to understand that if we are to do this thing right, we've got to make some bold decisions. So
Hmm.
every system needs a requisite level of due diligence when it comes to how it's being built, how it's being deployed, how it's being adopted, how it's being procured. We know that. Due diligence. What I speak about would be this concept of ethical vigilance. And we've got to ensure that we remain vigilant with these systems. We know there are drifts. We know that algorithms could move into places we're not expecting. We know that in the blink of an eye, it can deploy a decision that impacts an industry, a society, a family, an individual in real time in very painful ways. Some systems work well with the requisite level of due diligence and duty of care and that eternal vigilance. Some systems are broken. And if they're broken, sometimes it's not worth the while to fix it. It's best to bring it to an end. And some things we just do not build because they will not serve us when we think about the future of humanity.
But who makes the decision? Does that role even exist in most companies today? Who owns it?
Well, I think companies must have a conscience. And I think
But
companies are not existing in the stratosphere alone. Companies are existing in communities. The reasons that companies have CSR departments or companies integrate and work with the communities around them, it means that companies understand that they must have a conscience. They have a bigger role than just being a company. There's a greater responsibility. We know that all companies have compliance departments. We know that companies have legal departments and risks departments. And we know there are individuals in there who want to get things right, who want to ensure their organizations are doing things right, and who want that kind of support. So I think on a global level, we're seeing conversations that are happening globally. If it's at the G20, G7, United Nations, UNESCO, World Economic Forum, World Health Organization, all the global thinkers are putting their money on AI governance. So we know that's on the global level. We know on the national level, every country is now standing up national AI strategies to see how the country can benefit, to see how organizations can benefit, and see what they can do for their population to put them into the future. So companies, academia, criminal justice systems, everyone is talking about governance because the big AI question at the moment, it's not building the technology, it's not adopting the technology. The big question is governing the technology.
but where does the buck stop? Who is that person? What is that role? Who takes the full accountability when things go wrong?
Well, I think we're looking for one person, and an algorithm is not built by one person. An algorithm is built by many individuals. A system is deployed by many individuals. I think the responsibility belongs to each and every one of us in the organization. No one is absolved. Everyone is part of that decision making. And that is where that question of vigilance comes in. That's where the
Hmm.
question of an ethical conscience comes in. And that's where the basic question comes to play. Whatever you're doing, are you able to stand by that decision? And that's how I think.
No one person, no one is absolved. And that's the discipline this whole structure depends on. Everyone is staying engaged, everyone is actually exercising judgment. But what happens when technology itself starts to wear down people's ability to exercise that judgment in the first place? You have used a phrase that really stayed with me. You called it cognitive laziness. What do you mean by that?
I mean, sometimes when we're thinking about this technology and all the things that technology can do for us, many people are at risk of becoming cognitively lazy, which means you're not using your brain at the rate that you want it to use. If you're using a large language model and it's giving you a well-constructed email or a well-constructed business plan or a well-constructed article, you're not using your brain as you're supposed to use. I always say to people who are using these technologies, particularly the large language models, to support them, either in their professional lives, in their business lives, in their academic lives, is that you don't ever give up on brainstorming. You don't ever give up on giving the brain that sort of sprint that it
Mm,
requires. You need to sprint the brain. Okay, I
mm,
always tell people, sometimes the brain needs a casual walk, sometimes the brain needs a jog, and sometimes the brain needs that 100 meters dash that we see in the Olympics, right? And you see it. The people who may just use the technology for something quick, when you read what they write or when you engage with them, it sounds like something quick. And for the people who are more intelligent and who are using this thing in a more intelligent way, who are brainstorming, who are challenging the technology, the responses are going to be totally different. But I always tell people, when we think about AI, AI is just in so many places all of the time that we often don't understand how much of AI is part of our lives. And this is why I keep saying it's more than the tools, it's a governance system that we need to understand.
We spend this conversation looking at what happens when the AI system makes the wrong decisions, when the organizations stop exercising their own judgment. But those same capabilities don't exist in a vacuum. They can also be deliberately used by people who want to manipulate, deceive, or maybe exploit others. And I want to explore that side also. So you spent 2 decades studying how criminal adopts today a scam that once required real expertise, cloning a voice, forging an identity, can be done in a second with a cheap app. What changes when the cost of committing those crimes suddenly collapses? Who is exposed today that simply wasn't before?
Well, I think now we're realizing everyone is exposed with this technology. Everyone is vulnerable with this technology. There was a time when we spoke about vulnerable groups in AI as underserved, high needs communities. And now we're realizing that vulnerable groups in AI is just about every group that exists in the human ecosystem. We're all vulnerable to this technology in a particular way. It could be age, it could be geography, it could be ability, it could be disability, it could be gender, it could be sexuality. Each and every one of us is being impacted by this technology. When it comes to exposure, it's everyone. Children are being exposed to algorithms that are creating very unsavory attachments. The elderly may be exposed to scams. Young people may be exposed to technology that does not have their best interest. So the level of companies are being exposed because their leaders are not governing this technology and are going out there and trying to adopt and procure things they fully don't understand, opening the organization to an extraordinary amount of leadership risks without the requisite ethical business continuity. So we're all at risk. Society is at risk. And this is why you're hearing all the global voices now speaking about how do we govern this technology? What do we do? What are the economic challenges? What are the environmental challenges? What are the ethical challenges? How do we get it right? It's because the exposure is total impact at the moment.
How did it work about even 5 years ago or 10 years ago? And how does it work now?
Well, 10 years ago, people scammed you, and it took a little longer sometimes for you to find out, or it took a little longer for the investigation to be completed, or sometimes no one knew because you were, we weren't that internet savvy at the time, or social media savvy, where everything is happening in real time. A news cycle used to be 24 hours back in the day. A news cycle is about 24 seconds. The news happens and somebody posts it and you're seeing it. You don't even have to watch the 7 o'clock news because you've seen
Yeah.
it all on social media before 7 o'clock, right?
And many times you don't even know those news are really fake or right.
Oh, it's right. So yeah, the exposure. So the thing about this, and even in the criminal justice system, there are more things that are happening that are making you really have to be ahead of the game in real time. And AI has sort of reimagined the meaning of real time. It is real time. You've got to pay attention. You've got to understand deception in a way that you've never had to understand it before.
Yeah.
What is being required at the moment is more forensic media to
Yeah.
decipher what is real and what is unreal, to decipher
Yeah.
what you can trust, what you cannot trust. So even the criminal justice system is requiring extra eyes and ears to
Mm.
understand all of what is happening. But the main thing is this: our conscience as human beings, and the fact that we've got to be more proactive. We've got to understand the kinds of preventative approaches that we need to take, and we have got to have more awareness. This moment calls for two things, I say: critical
Mm.
thinking and a level of awareness that is 360 degrees. You've got to be aware of what's happening with this technology.
Critical thinking, 360-degree awareness, that's the individual response. But some of what's happening right now isn't really about deception anymore. It is about the system itself starting to act like an authority. And she has a phrase for exactly that shift. You used a phrase called code is the new cop. What do you mean by that? Can you explain? And what changes when software starts exercising that kind of power over people?
So when we think about algorithmic policing, and we think about how many companies and third-party sort of vendors are creating these algorithmic tools, of course, build on code to police. And we're deploying many of these things on the streets. Whether or not we're getting the kinds of results, no.
Mm.
We realize that AI has overpromised and underdelivered in policing and criminal justice, and many of the kinds of deployments that they are sort of heralded to deliver. We've come to realize that we're deploying code, and we're deploying
Mm.
code on the streets. An algorithm is now an undercover cop. An algorithm now acts as an informant. An algorithm acts as so many different roles in the criminal justice system. But the law at the moment is realizing that many of these decisions may be inaccurate. Many of them may be just not the kinds of decisions that we want to make. But we've got to understand, even in the world of policing, or I should say, even more so in the world of policing, we've got to be attuned to how these technologies are being used and how they're being abused and how they must be governed.
Here's what I'm thinking. So imagine that an innocent person ends up in court. The stakes become even higher. The courts depend on evidence. But we are entering in a world, Professor Cummings, where convincing evidence can be manufactured. What changes when seeing something no longer enough to believe whether it is real?
Well, what it does, it destroys trust. And the criminal justice system, and any system, from the criminal justice system to an organizational system to a country's national identity, everything that we do is built on trust in this world. Even when we start relationships with people, we don't know who people are when we
Mm.
meet people, but there's a certain element of trust that we go into a relationship with, a marriage with, a job with, a courtroom with, a boardroom with, right? And what it does, it really undermines trust. So this is why we've got to get public trust right when it comes to AI, because it's making a lot of decisions, and a lot of people are very skeptical now of those decisions. Are they real? Is what we're seeing real? Is it manufactured evidence? And this is why the
Exactly.
court is so attuned to these things. Of course, there are many, globally, the criminal justice legislation does not embrace facial recognition technology evidence or other evidence that may be derived from a robotic dog that's policing a compound, or the ways in which video evidence is admissible or not admissible. These are
Yeah.
things the criminal justice system is still grappling with. And indeed, things could be manufactured. And that's why I said forensic media is so critical at the moment, because we need the kinds of tools to uh, sort of deconstruct the technology to ensure that what we're seeing is really what we are seeing. And that's the question with AI, if what we are seeing is truly what we are seeing.
And even it can be the other way, it can be the real evidence also. Does it become easier to dismiss as a fake? So I'm wondering, what does the judge do in that situation?
But what the judge will do in that situation is the judge has to call in the experts, because remember, the judge lets you know that they are there to ensure what is the best decision that needs to be made. But they're dealing with, of course, evidence, and they've got to bring in the experts who are going to speak to that evidence. Either it's sometimes you see the forensic psychologist, the forensic pathologist. Now we're seeing forensic media experts in there as well, looking at the information, or forensic data scientists who are telling you about what this data has been able to do, things that a judge may not see.
Everything we have covered so far is about adults, people who, at least in theory, can call on experts, demand due process, fight back. But there is one group that doesn't have any of that. And I wanted to know where the responsibility for protecting them actually begins. You contributed to the Thorn Report, the one on keeping kids safe from generative AI. And the whole argument is safety has to be built in from the start, not bolted on later. So, what's the earliest decision a team makes that actually determines whether a child ends up safe or not?
To build or not to build? That is the question. Do we build the system, or we do not build the system because of its impact on our children, or impact on any group? And that is the first question that we need to ask. And then if we decide to build, we have got to understand that we need to do that really rigorous and robust red teaming that's required to understand the kinds of risks that could be deployed with systems. And sometimes the risks are so unimaginable because we do not know what the technology is going to do when those various streams of data come together to create that ocean that often puts us in a very dangerous position, that data ocean.
Can you talk a little bit about where exactly, whether it's a training data, the fine tuning, the deployment,
We've come to
which
realize
decision
it's across the pipeline.
across the
It's
pipeline?
across the data pipeline. You have got to bring that requisite level of duty of care, due diligence, duty to warn, uh, things about due process, and just the ways in which we are thinking. The entire data pipeline. I said it at the beginning. Every decision we use when it comes to data, every data decision, to use, to not use, to amplify, to not amplify, right? So every data decision is a data governance decision. So if you decide to put A is going to have a consequences. A is going to have a consequence, and A is going to have a cost, and A is going to have an impact that needs to be governed. So it is and you see, we can't single one individual out, whether or not it's this person or that. It's everyone working together holds that responsibility. It is about collective responsibility, almost like when we, as a society, as a world, as a globe, embraced the social contract. And the social contract was we were going to embrace this contract with each other for what we were going to get, this thing called government, and government was going to provide the kinds of laws that were required, the kinds of justice that was required, the kinds of resources, everything that we needed. That's how government was born, right? And we're seeing the same thing at the moment. It's time to rethink the social contract, because when it was done, we had no clue about the power of AI or the power of an algorithm. So it's about collective responsibility. We are all a part of the responsibility ecosystem.
You used a phrase called algorithmic grooming. Can you explain what do you mean by that and why did you choose that word?
Well, definitely. When we think about reinforcement learning, when we think about the algorithms that are being deployed and how children are building attachments, and adults as well, attachments
Mm.
to these algorithms, when we speak about children and this kind of artificial intimacy that they're developing with many of these tools, we know that it's a form of grooming. Reinforcement is a form of grooming. So we know about grooming when we think about criminal justice, when we think about abuse, when we think about the ways in which children could be unduly influenced by adults, when children could be exposed to a particular kind of environment that grooms them into criminality or grooms them into dishonesty or grooms them into fraud or grooms them into volatile situations. We are realizing the ways in which many of these algorithms are being built. It's grooming by design, it's attachment by design, it's undue influence by design. And that's where we've got to pay attention to really how these algorithms are being built and the sort of motive behind the deployment of many of these algorithms.
Many times the engineers who build these algorithms could say, I was optimizing for engagement and not targeting children. What do you say to that?
What I say to that is that what you are exposing there is that lack of due diligence, because you could be optimizing for one thing and optimizing for something else at the same time. And this is where that ethical vigilance and ethical resilience must come in. What were the questions you asked as you were optimizing for engagement?
This leads somewhere incredibly difficult that we need to talk about directly, because we are now seeing cases across the world where children form deep emotional attachments to AI companions. And in some cases, those relationships end in tragedy. What's actually happening in that relationships?
What's happening there is that parents and caregivers and adults have got to realize that we are no longer the most important people in our children's lives. And many times, people and adults and caregivers have used technology as a way to babysit. When we got the television, we knew that we could put kids in front of the TV and they would sit there for hours while we did the things that we needed to do. As soon as we put the phone and the tablet in their hands, we knew that we had them engaged for hours. Now, parents, as a parent myself, we know that sometimes we need our own time. Sometimes we need to focus on the things that we need to focus, and sometimes we need a break. And many times technology provided that break for us. Sometimes when we put them in front of technology, we were also on technology doing our own things. But what we realized is that we childproof the home, but we did not childproof the algorithm. We allowed them to engage with something that they really did not understand how to engage with and what they were engaging with. I speak about stranger danger in the age of AI is not an individual that you're going to meet outside of the home. It's the algorithms that you're using in the intimacy of your home. And what we're seeing, particularly with children, is some of these attachments are creating great psychological and psychiatric challenges, and some of them are creating life and death challenges, where we've seen children who've committed suicide because of the ways in which they engage with this technology.
I want to understand a little bit more, and I'm thinking that it's probably leading to the new program you launched, A.W.A.R.E, Algorithmic Well-Being and Responsible Engagement. You described it as a public health initiative on AI and child safety. So can you explain what this program about? Why is it a public health approach? What changes when we start thinking about AI in that way instead of treating it as just another technology problem?
Well, we understand that AI's impact is socio-technical. AI's impact is not only technical, AI is a socio-technical tool as well. It's changing systems, it's impacting every system our societies have used and have been built on. When something attacks a system, it's just not something that is technical. It's not only impacting us sociologically, it's impacting us psychologically. It's impacting our neurological networks as we are mapping, let's say, neurological approaches and neural networks when it comes to computer and machine learning. We're seeing the impact of our own sort of neural dynamics as well. And what we're understanding is that these attachment bonds are just very deep. And what we've got to understand, many years ago in the 60s and the 70s, there was
Hmm.
a lot attraction around something like flammable pajamas. There was a time that companies in the 60s and 70s were using materials to make children's pajamas that was flammable because they were putting motifs and cartoons on it, and they were using dyes and fabric that could just blow up on kids. There was a time when a baby rattler was seen as a toy you could put in a baby's hand. But as the baby was putting it more and more in its mouth, we realized that the paint that was being used to create these tools were lead paint, right? And we started to realize that toys could poison children. So simple household things could become very dangerous for children. And this is why a public health approach, it's because technology is so pervasive. It's everywhere. It is almost like a silent pandemic, the ways in which young people and elderly people, because now we're seeing resurrection tools. We're seeing data being used to build people who have died because we don't want closure. We want to continue to have relationships with people who've passed on, or people who've left us, or people we've divorced, or people who've broken up with us. So we're seeing those types of attachment bonds that are becoming very, very dangerous. For children, we've got to take a public health approach because technology impacts just every aspect of our lives. If something is impacting your psychological health, it's also impacting your physical health. It's impacting the ways in which you're building relationships, the ways in which you're not engaging. If a child uses technology and ends up committing suicide, we understand why it's a public health. Suicide is a public health challenge. I was in Davos
Hmm.
speaking at an event and speaking about questions of artificial intimacy and speaking about how do we protect children. And when I spoke about it being a public health challenge, immediately I wanted to do something to really raise awareness globally. And I got together with two colleagues, Joel and Kwesi, and this company called C Context. And we came up with this formula to really break it down for parents to understand. And it's not about judging, but it's about having conversations with your children to understand how they are using the technology and to make the requisite interventions. Because what you want to do is protect your children. And oftentimes, as parents, as caregivers, as grandparents, as older siblings, we believe we want to protect them from physical things. So we want to protect you from a drawer falling down on you. So furniture companies now send you many gadgets to ensure that you safeguard a drawer or a chest of drawers or a whatever it is that, whatever you need to put your clothes in, because we know that kids sometimes pull the drawers out and try to climb on them as ladders, right? As steps. So a public health approach means it needs to be public. It needs to understand the implications on our various health, mental, physical, psychological. It's very important. And we need to understand its impact on the future development of children, on childhood development, on mental health. It is very, very important. And it's one of the biggest questions. And what I'm really calling for is for consumer protection, because in the 60s, particularly in the US, since 1969, there was the Child Protection and Toy Safety Act that said that some toys were dangerous, some toys were toxic, and some toys were very, not the kinds of things that you wanted to deploy in the home. And I think we've got to think about the relationship between children and algorithms the very same way.
Listening to you, I wonder if we are focusing on the wrong thing. We keep talking about responsible AI, but AI optimizes whatever objectives we give it. Isn't the real issue whether we have chosen the right objective in the first place?
I think it's not the choosing of the right objective, is that we went into something head first and we did not really think about the implications. And that's the deception of data. When you spoke about the computer scientist or the data scientist who's optimizing for engagement and who's doing a great job,
Hmm.
who's doing a great job. You are brilliant. You know what you want to build. You have this great innovative mindset. You're futurist and you're going in there to build the tool that's going to really deliver everything the client wants. But at the same time, you're not thinking about something else because why should I be thinking about child protection? And I'm
Hmm.
working in financial services, right? And you just don't see the relationship. But
Yeah.
that is the thing about data. That is the thing about data, that data carries many stories. It carries many stories at the same time. And we've seen that. You've collected data for one thing, but then it immediately exposes everything else. We could go into a community and collect data specifically for homicide, but that data now reveals critical questions about healthcare, about childcare,
Yeah.
about education, about family income. So, one approach to data often reveals many other approaches. And that's why I say it always comes back to understanding data. And we need to be uh, really sophisticated thinkers when it comes to data. So you could never optimize for one thing
Hmm.
when it comes to data because there are many things going to be optimizing at the same time. And this is where that eternal vigilance comes in. And this is where data governance and AI governance come in, because we've got to think about how do we govern this technology best for all of us.
Everything we talked about today comes back to one idea, that is, technology reflects human choices. So, if we are serious about protecting our children, building trustworthy AI, and preventing harm, is the real challenge no longer just technological, or is it really about being much more intentional about what we ask these systems to optimize for?
Definitely. And I think you said it right there. Technology has never been about technology. Technology has always been about humanity. And we have got to always understand that. When someone comes up with an idea, the idea of technology comes from the imagination. And it always comes back to this ethical imagination and the conscience of our imagination. Because technology was first an idea. The steam engine was first an idea. The motor car was first an idea. The airplane was first an idea. The algorithm was first an idea. And what is the ethical conscience in
Mhm.
which we imagine to build?
That's our choice.
Indeed, it is. And it is not our choice, it is a collective choice. Because when we build, when we innovate, when we deploy, it is no longer ours. An idea never belongs to one man or one woman or one person or one individual.
Mm. So everything so far has been about system that judge, score, predict. But what changes when software stops advising and start doing things?
We're trying to still figure out autonomous AI and agentic
Yes.
AI. We're still trying to figure that out, right? And we've not figured out generative AI yet, but we're trying to figure out agentic AI, and we're trying to figure out super intelligence, artificial general intelligence at the same time. And it all comes back to the basic question:
Yeah.
governance. How do we govern something that we cannot see? How do we govern something that's going to go out there and make very critical decisions without our agency, without us participating actively in that decision where the human is dormant and the technology is the one that is active and alive. A job for us that we're not seeing, and how do we do this in a way that is risk averse, a way that is crisis informed, and a way in which we are getting governance right. So it comes back always to responsibility, individual and collective.
Can you give me one concrete action an agent takes, something that goes wrong, and what was the real failure from angle of a criminologist? What do they really miss? Can you
I
walk
think
me through one?
sure.
Yeah.
And it's this. It's about drift. You build an algorithm, you use data, and then it starts to drift in a direction that you cannot see. Remember, we cannot see an algorithm at work. So we're everything we build with technology, we build with hope. We build hope into technology because we hope this is going to work. We hope it works well. We hope it's not going to do anything dangerously. We hope it's not going to undermine a particular system. We are trying to govern something that we cannot see in real time. And we have to provide some sort of framework to govern this. And it comes back to the one thing: critical thinking, which is so very important, and due diligence. And when I'm speaking about due diligence, is that understanding, that duty of care, that duty to warn, due process, ethical vigilance. You've got to be on top of it. You have got to be on top of it. You cannot take a stroll in the park approach when you're dealing with technology. You have to forever be asking yourself, who's going to be impacted? How they're going to be impacted? When are they going to be impacted? Where in the ecosystem are they going to be impacted? Are they going to be able to make an intervention in real time? Are they going to be able to avert the kind of impact? How are we going to ensure this impact is a soft landing and we're not going to crash this system? How are we going to ensure that we're not going to destroy someone's life with the decision that we've just made?
Don't destroy someone's life with a decision you just made. And that's the standard she's holding these systems to. But there is a harder question sitting underneath all of it: trust. For whom exactly? We talk a lot about building trust for the AI, but the question people should ask is the trust for whom?
It's trust for everyone. Society is built on trust, and I say that all the time. It's about public trust. And this is why we speak often about public interest technology, building AI in the interest of the public, ensuring the public are aware of the impact of this technology, the power of this technology, how to engage with this technology, how not to engage with this technology, how to protect your privacy if you can still do that in the age in which we live, how to protect yourselves, but how to use this technology to advance yourself and your society and the economy and the ways in which we are thinking about the future, how to get fully involved. AI is something that's exciting. It's a very exciting time to be alive, to see the things that we can do with this technology. It continues to fascinate me every day, the things that I'm seeing the technology do. But it also means I've got to be better at the things I do. I've got to be better thinking critically. I've got to be better understanding the risks. I've got to be better creating the interventions to avert a crisis. I've got to be better about informing society and groups and individuals and teachers and children about the technology. So it's an exciting time for us to think about this technology and not only think about the rewards. The rewards we are hoping are going to be shared by all of us. It's not looking like that at the moment, but we've got to think about ways to bring people in to this market, but also to give them the awareness that is required, because awareness is really the first stage of protection and prevention for any sort
I know
of
it's a
dangers
challenge.
that the technology could deploy. Yeah.
Can the trust ever be rebuilt once it is broken? For a person or for an entire community, how do you do that?
Well, we've seen it already. We know that there are particular communities that have historically existed that have a very contentious relationship with data. We know that all data is not created equally. We know that some communities have not truly benefited from the positives of data. Data has been used against them. Data has been weaponized against those communities. So we know there are some communities that have a fear. When you go to particular groups and ask for their data, there's a fear. They're not going to give up their data so easily because they know in the past that we allowed you to take our data and it did not work for us, right? So there are going to be those fears when it comes to healthcare. We speak about the ways in which we've underdiagnosed and the ways in which we've misdiagnosed and how we've missed diagnosing certain groups because many of our healthcare data sets are not diverse enough to understand the need for healthcare equity or for an inclusive approach to healthcare. So trust is critical. Once it's broken, it's the hardest thing to ever rebuild. And you see it. The funny thing is this: in the US, we have the 5 top companies in the world that own all our data. We are producing most of the sort of commercial engagement tools when it comes to AI. Most of the AI conversations, the rewards and the risks are coming out of the US, but there's the greatest amount of fear for AI in the US as well, because we've understand that the criminal justice system has worked against certain groups historically. And if you tell me you're going to bring AI to make it work better, I think those communities are saying no. What it's going to do, it's going to amplify our pain. It's going to amplify the distrust. It's going to amplify the inequity. So this is why the governance question is so critical. But we also know there's a crisis in governance globally. And many people are no longer trusting their governments. And many people are very skeptical about their governments. And if there was ever a time in our history where conspiracy theories are abundant and alive, it is this time. It is this moment. So this is the greatest challenge that we have. It's the crisis of governance in the world of AI and just in the world at large.
And now we are in this agentic AI systems that has changed itself, hasn't it? Because instead of asking who's accountable after something goes wrong, should we now be asking how do we stop it from happening in the first place?
Well, if we're now asking that question, it means we got it wrong from the start. And I think what we need to do is that we need to, sort of, we're not going to stop building. No one is going to stop building and no one is going to stop deploying. That's the nature in which we live. Everyone wants to take something to market first, to set up the first stall, to get the first set of buyers. Everyone's trying to do that. We know how the market works. But what we also need to know is how humanity works. And we also need to know how conscience is supposed to work. And we need to bring the best of us to bear on this technology, because if we bring the worst of us to bear on this technology, we are going to have a future that is not going to be kind to any of us.
When you look at the way the companies are building today, the agentic systems, what's the biggest blind spot you see over and over again?
Governance. How do you govern something that you can't see? You may think about risk, you may red team, but you've got to find the kind of governance framework that works for something that is autonomous. And we've got to do that. And it's nothing new. It's been done before. We've sent, machines into, outer space. We've put machines on the moon. So we've done things before, but we've got to think critically about this moment. We've got to do more public engagement. We've got to build those public trust frameworks in there as well. And we've got to be more inclusive in how we're doing this.
What worries you the most that could go wrong?
We don't want to think about that kind of catastrophe of an agentic system going wrong. Those are the things we never want to think about it, because I will say this to you. If an agentic system was to go wrong, the implications, the scale of the implication, the catastrophe, it's unimagined. We don't ever want to put ourselves there. So this is why it's good to bring the requisite level of due diligence and duty of care and sophisticated understanding about the power that these tools hold.
The power these tools hold. That's exactly why I wanted to ask her about something she had written a few weeks earlier, a line that had genuinely stayed with me. A few weeks ago, I think you wrote something. Every algorithm is a policy decision. Every AI system is a values statement. Most engineers would say that they are just writing code. So where exactly do value enters the system?
No one is just writing code. Every one of us brings our value system to the work that we do. Every one of us brings our value system to the work that we do, no matter what work it is. For us to be of a particular age to get the kind of job, it means that we come with a particular level of life experience. And from the day we are born to the day we die, we continue to innovate that value system based on the experiences that we have or the experiences that we do not have. So each of us presents ourselves as a value decision as well.
If you could sit with a founder one day, what were systems they're building? What is the one decision that you would tell them not to get wrong? Because it is almost impossible to do it later.
The one decision I will tell them to not get wrong is the idea of what the future is supposed to look like. Because if you get that wrong, it means that you have now removed from so many people an opportunity to build a legacy and an opportunity to imagine themselves in that future. So you have got to bring a kind of sophisticated conscience, understanding, because we don't all exist now. You know, you and I are here in the now, but in 10 and 15 years, we're going to be in a future that somebody has built. We're not going to be, in this space forever. And that's what's so important, to bring that level of conscience. And, I often ask people, just think of what that future is going to be and where you are going to be in that future as well.
Have you thought about that future?
And that is the work that brought me into this space, because I wanted to ensure that the future that we are building is not only equitable, but it gives each and every one an opportunity to imagine, to dream, to participate, to benefit, to live comfortably, to live within an environment that is healthy and safe. Questions around prosperity and longevity are critical to me. Well-being, mindset. What is humanity? What is life? At the end of the day, when we come to that last breath and we look back, are we going to talk about technology? Are we going to talk about algorithms? Are we going to talk about profits? We're going to talk about how we lived our lives and how we treated people and who we loved and who loved us and what we left for those people who are part of our family, who are part of our society. And those are the big questions when we're about to take that last breath. We're not going to ask, are the algorithms are okay? We're going to ask, is our generation okay? Are our children going to be okay? Have I lived the life that I was supposed to live? So let's put priority on the things that give this world meaning. And let's use AI to make a world that is so beautiful. And we can do that. We can do that.
Professor Cummings, that's a great place to end. Before we wrap up, I would love to know, how was this for you? And any final thought, anything that you want to leave with the audience with?
Well, what I would say to you, it's a very exciting time. Get involved with this technology. One of the other things I would say is please engage with my global public health campaign, A.W.A.R.E. You can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me at the University of Virginia School of Data Science. I also want to say, get the right governance strategies in there. I do a really robust training program for CEOs, C-suites, executive leaders, and boards. Just engage with me, have more conversation with me, and go out there and build beautiful AI. That's what I want to say.
Professor Cummings, thank you so much for the time today. It's
Thank
been
you.
a real privilege and honor for me. And please know that you're always welcome to be on the show.